Hello, everybody. This is our group project, and our group members are Amanda, Bethany, Carrie, and Emily. So, our topic will be a critique of the treatment of modal verbs in a published ESL material. So, the grammar workbook that will be examined will be from Aristotle Educational Press, the Development Skills, Grammar, and Usage for Junior Secondary Learners. For Form 1 Secondary 1 students, and the units that we have picked would be on modal verbs. So please note that even though there are other chapters related to modal verbs, but still we only picked one chapter because this is the introductory. So we'll divide the whole presentation in three parts. So part A will be more on how the grammar items is presented, and secondly, we'll take a look at the different grammar exercise found in the workbook, and lastly, we'll have a summary on the strengths and weaknesses on how modal verbs is presented in this workbook. So first, let's take a look at can and could. So it's found that in the textbook, it mentioned about can and could from the perspective of explaining functions. So it says can tell people about the ability of somebody to do something. And it also mentioned about the past tense, the past form that students need to use could. We found that so here only stresses the ability, and we found that other functions of can or could, for example, the possibility or permission, is are actually not mentioned here. So other than the definition, it also talks about the negative form of can and could, that is, cannot and could not. Yep. And also the contracted form, can't and couldn't. But we found that there is an issue for Hong Kong students, which they usually mix up between the form cannot and cannot. But here we couldn't find any explanation on this. So other than the definition and the negative form, it also bring up the use in form of questions in the textbook. So it mentioned about how people can ask others about their ability in the form of the questions, and is targeting on the yes or no questions. But it's found that yeah, there's only yes or no questions found, but we couldn't find anything related to WH questions. So the next item is on be able to. So it talks about the forms and functions of be able to, including the definition, which is similar to can or could, that is about somebody's ability to do something, the negative form, and also when they're forming in the questions, how it will be formed, yeah, when it is in the form of a question. So the questions here is since the two definitions of be able to and can or could are actually very close, it is hard to tell the difference between can and be able to. So other than the definition and the forms, is also talk about the difference between can, could, and be able to. So this is what is found in the workbook. Yep, so it talks about it's more common to use can instead. And also when we mention about something specific and in the past occasion. So be able to is more preferred. So the question here is, so in what situation is it more common? And another thing is how specific it is when we are using was or were able to when we are referring to some past occasion. So this one is a summary of what we can find on the workbook in explaining the meaning, the forms, structures, and the types. Yep, so in general, they all mention about the structure, like how the students can occur in the form of negation, contractions, and questions. Yeah. But the point is, we couldn't find um, anything about modality in in the workbook. So that is talking about in what situation are we usually using modality to express something. So it's never mentioned in the workbook. So other than can, could, and be able to. So the third thing in the workbook would be must and have to. So here in the workbook, it mentioned about must or have to. Yeah, they explain the two things together, saying that it refers to what someone needs to do, while have to usually talk about fact, rules, and orders, and must is trying to give strong advice or recommendation. So so our credit is given here because we found that explicit teaching on the meaning of the form between must and have to are actually explained here. So other than how the two differences is also mentioned about the forms specifically to have to, the use of have to. For example, the different forms like have to, has to, and had to, and also negation and questions, which is similar to what we can found in the in the previous two items. So we get a questions here like, do we think explicit teaching of the form is necessary? So we think it is a must because yeah, our target students are actually secondary one students, so it's actually quite hard for them to notice the form by themselves. So this is what we think teaching the form in meaning, yep, is essential. Yeah, because but we also need to remind students that they need to consider situations before they decide which modal verbs to use. So after taking a look on how um, the several modal verbs are explained in the textbook, so in the second part, we are showing you different practice materials found in the workbook. So there are in total A to F practices. So we start with practice A. So practice A is more on can or count, can and count. So but after doing this exercise, we wonder students could actually get a kind of awareness on the form and functions of can or count. Yep. So it seems that it is more on the usage between can or could and can't, and it's more focusing on whether they can pick the suitable verb in the brackets provided here. So it's actually quite hard for students to focus on the function. Yeah, because they need because for the real practice instead they need to identify in what situation they should use can or count instead of matching the correct verb in the correct questions with the correct question. So another Another comment is, can students actually understand how can or count can be used in different sentences? Yeah. So in another way, because not only can or could are mentioned in this unit, so we also wonder, yeah, whether students understand in some cases, be able to may also be applicable to some of the answers. Yep. So the other exercise, practice B, is on could or couldn't. Yep, so here it's mainly on ability in the past, where yeah, echoing what is said in the explanation part. And we also found that both affirmative and negative forms are explained here, and yeah, and giving not explained, but trying to get students to practice in this exercise. Yep. So here we think that after the two practices, it seems like it's giving students a kind of feeling that whenever they talk about modal verbs, it seems like it's only related to ability. So, but what about the other functions of modal verbs like possibilities? Because it's never mentioned in this unit. So for practice C, it's something different because it's adding another item in that is be able to. So students they're asked to choose between the two options can or be able to in different situations. So in reality, so we found that it's actually more on testing students' understanding on the use of tenses in the questions, and also the other four questions are more on the special occasions like this. The boats fishing boat sank, so here they're asked to use be able to according to what they said in the book that special occasions are needed is used.